It's his second climb down in as many days over the imposition of trade tariffs. First, Donald Trump rode back in relation to Mexico. And in the last couple of hours, Canada has also won a reprieve on goods covered in a trade agreement with the U.S.
We do have some breaking news just into us. President Trump now pumping the brakes on a trade war, pausing tariffs on both Canada and Mexico for at least 30 days in exchange for both countries beefing up U.S. security on their borders.
On December 31st, just hours before the new tariffs were set to hit on Canada, the White House quietly issued a proclamation delaying the increases for 1 full year. This last-minute delay on the major U.S. tariff hike has sparked relief across the industry, but that reaction is dangerously misplaced. This wasn't generosity, it was positioning for the U.S. Because a delay like this isn't a pause, it's pressure. It signals that Canada is no longer negotiating deals, it's negotiating time. Every extension, every postponement, every temporary measure is part of a larger strategy that keeps Canada off balance and Washington firmly in control. This so-called reprieve is actually a demonstration of how modern trade power works. Tariffs aren't just taxes anymore, they're tools of influence, calibrated to shape behavior without ever firing a shot. And this latest move may be the clearest example yet of how economic policy becomes leverage long before it becomes law. This can be explored further through negotiating time, modern trade power, and economic leverage. In plain terms, this is not relief. It's a leash. And it matters for a bigger reason than wood, cabinets, or furniture. This move rewrites the playbook for the looming USMCA, CUSMA, review, and it exposes Canada's new reality. It is negotiating from a position of permanent, manufactured weakness. Let's break down how this trap works, step by step, because once you see the mechanics, you start seeing the same blueprint everywhere. Start with the weapon. In recent months, the US has been targeting specific Canadian export sectors with tariffs that are narrow, strategic, and psychologically devastating. Reports and industry coverage have pointed to measures hitting Canadian softwood lumber and finished wood products, upholstered furniture, kitchen cabinets, bathroom vanities, under the familiar and highly expandable language of national security and unfair trade. Now, whether every percentage point has been reported consistently across outlets, the strategic direction is clear. This isn't random protectionism. It's calibrated pressure on politically and economically sensitive supply chains. And the escalation path is the key. The story that matters is that the tariffs were not just imposed. They were paired with a scheduled escalation, higher rates that would kick in after a set date, creating a cliff edge for Canadian producers. If you run a cabinet factory in Quebec, Ontario, or British Columbia, this is not an academic policy change. It's a countdown timer attached to your payroll, your contracts, your credit lines, and your survival. Then comes the twist. Right as that escalation was approaching, the US issues a proclamation that delays the hike for 1 year. On a spreadsheet, it looks like a pullback. It looks like restraint. It looks like America stepping away from the ledge. But in the real geometry of power, a delayed threat can be more potent than an executed one. Because a fully imposed catastrophic tariff forces adaptation. It forces a yes or no, survive or die response. But a catastrophic tariff that is threatened, then suspended, does something far more insidious. It creates a state of perpetual crisis. Think about what a 1-year suspended threat does to an industry. It freezes investment. Why would a Canadian manufacturer expand capacity, upgrade machinery, or hire more workers if the entire cost structure can be rewritten by a political decision in Washington? It paralyzes contracts. Why would a US buyer sign a long-term supply agreement with a partner whose pricing could become non-competitive overnight? It destabilizes financing. Banks hate uncertainty. Investors hate political risk. A factory living under a suspended tariff threat looks like a bad bet, even if it's profitable today. It drains management attention. Your leadership team stops thinking about innovation, productivity, market expansion. They start thinking about survival scenarios, relocation, legal defenses, and contingency plans. And here's the genius of it, from Washington's side. The administrative cost is almost zero. The threat does the work. Canada absorbs the economic pain now, through paralysis, without the US having to fully execute the blow. This is the first layer of the trap, the weaponization of uncertainty itself. Now let's talk timing, because timing is the strategy. We are entering the shadow of the most consequential trade event in North America in a generation. It is the mandatory USMCA, CUSMA, review. This one-year delay is not separate from that review. It is the opening move inside it. By pausing the escalation, the US doesn't give Canada a concession. It manufactures a bargaining chip out of thin air. And the message to Canada is chilling. It's basically this: your furniture and cabinet sector has been granted a 12-month stay. We control the lever. Its survival is now part of the negotiation agenda. What are you prepared to offer us to make this permanent? That is how coercive negotiation works. You take something that should be stable market access, and you convert it into a temporary privilege that has to be purchased, through concessions, at the bargaining table. This is why TradEconomics keeps repeating the same principle. In modern geopolitics, trade is not just economics. It is a system of leverage. And the US has learned a powerful tactic. That you don't just demand what you want. You threaten what the other side already has. This is hostage-taking, re-engineered for trade policy. Not a hostage in the dramatic sense of a single event, but a sector hostage. A targeted industry with a visible execution date attached to it. And once you start thinking like this, you see the deeper shift. Canada is no longer negotiating to gain advantages. Canada is negotiating to prevent scheduled damage. Its posture becomes defensive by design. Its strategy becomes reactive. Its political capital gets consumed just trying to keep industries alive. That fundamentally poisons its negotiating position. Because you can't negotiate from strength when you're constantly forced to pay to maintain the status quo. Now let's ask the obvious question: what about domestic American pain? Wouldn't a huge tariff hike on cabinets and vanities hurt US consumers? Wouldn't it raise costs for home builders, renovators, and households? Yes. And that is precisely why this one-year delay is so revealing. A sudden, massive tariff escalation would likely trigger immediate price spikes and generate a coalition of angry domestic US victims, contractors, retailers, builders, consumers, especially in an election environment. That backlash is politically dangerous. So what does Washington do? It delays the escalation and keeps the threat alive. This is not a retreat from protectionism. It is the maturation of protectionism into sustainable economic statecraft. It allows the US to keep the pressure on Canada while insulating its own domestic constituencies from immediate blowback. It preserves political capital for bigger fights: steel, autos, agriculture, and the larger USMCA review itself. This is why Canada should be alarmed, not relieved. Because it signals that US coercion is becoming more sophisticated. Not reckless. Not impulsive. Calibrated. Enduring. And for Canada, that is far worse, because it means the pressure won't conveniently collapse under US domestic politics. It will be managed to survive. Now, what is Canada's move? This is where the TradEconomics thesis crystallizes into a national dilemma. Canada is wealthy in resources. It sits inside integrated North American supply chains. It exports heavily into the US market. And that wealth is exactly what makes it vulnerable. Because every valuable export sector becomes a potential hostage. Today it's furniture, cabinets, and vanities. Tomorrow it's dairy. Then steel and aluminum. Then autos. Then digital policy. Then procurement rules. Then provincial regulations. Once the method is normalized, the entire economy becomes a menu of leverage points. And it also undermines Canada's traditional diplomatic identity, stability and predictability. Canada's brand, historically, has been rules-based, reliable, dependable. But how can Canada credibly pitch itself as predictable when access to the US market can be unilaterally threatened, paused, escalated, and suspended on political timing? The US is demonstrating that the rules are whatever it says they are when it finds it convenient. That makes Canada's traditional playbook, appeals to precedent, shared benefit, institutional norms, look structurally weak. Now, Canada does have leverage. Let's be honest. Canada supplies energy. Canada is integrated into US manufacturing chains. Canada is part of North American production systems that are not easily replaced overnight. But here's the problem. Canada's leverage is mostly negative. It can threaten mutual disruption. It can warn that US industries will also suffer. But in a contest of who can endure more pain, the larger and less dependent economy usually holds the advantage. And Washington has calculated that it can endure more disruption than Ottawa. So Canada is cornered into a brutal choice. Option 1. Make concessions, real concessions, to purchase temporary safety for sector after sector. Option 2. Call the bluff and risk serious economic damage, hoping US domestic pain forces retreat before Canadian industries break. That is a catastrophic gamble with Canada's industrial base. And the opponent Canada is facing has already shown it prefers controlled, calculated pressure over reckless brinkmanship. So here is the real story of this tariff delay. It's not about wood, furniture, cabinets, or vanities. It is a preview, precise and premeditated, of the entire USMCA review dynamic. It reveals the new American negotiation manual: create leverage through suspended threats. Segment your opponent's economy into manageable hostages. Force them to spend political capital buying back the stability they thought they already owned. And convert every request for predictability into a concession you can extract elsewhere. For Canada, the chilling implication is that its economic relationship with the United States has entered a new phase. The permanent negotiation. A system no longer governed by stable rules, but by managed crisis, where Canadian prosperity is provisional, always subject to renewal under pressure at the next bargaining session. So don't call this delayed peace. Call it what it is: the formalization of an economic siege. Not conducted with blockades, but with legal proclamations, suspended threats, and negotiation directives designed to keep an entire country living under a clock. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Canada should start treating these pauses as negotiation traps, signals of permanent leverage? Or do you think Ottawa still has a strategy that can break this cycle? Drop your view in the comments. If you want more analysis that focuses on the mechanics of power, not just the headlines, subscribe to TradEconomics and turn on notifications. And share this with one person who still believes trade policy is just economics. Because in the age of coercive interdependence, awareness isn't a luxury. It's the first form of defense.